Welcome to the Donna Seebo Show. Donna is an international mental practitioner, psychic, award-winning author, counselor, speaker, teacher, and radio television talk show personality. She brings to the airwaves talented people from around the world who share their insights and experiences with you, the listening audience. Now, let's join Donna.
Hello and welcome. We're going to be talking about how you can change your mindset and change your life. There is a quote by Maya Angelou that my guest this evening, Dr. Charryse Johnson, has put in the very beginning of her book, Expired Mindsets. We may encounter many defeats, but we must not be defeated. I want to welcome Dr. Charryse Johnson to the show. I love your cover. It looks like somebody was in a special area, and I want to say Carmel, California, where they took a picture of a tree that's been formed by the winds of life and how graceful and lovely it is. And it is something that I think is a good representation about the topic in your book. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. You are extremely observant. People notice a lot about what's inside the book. Very few realize that the cover does have a lot of symbolism.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Very, very much so. And then the lovely long, I want to say it looks like a canoe, but it also could be one of those flat boat type of, what do I want to say, boats that goes along in very shallow waters, and just it's a flat boat because on the bottom it just goes right over the waters very easily, whereas a boat that might dip more deeply in the water, then it would not necessarily make the journey. So it's a beautiful, beautiful color arrangement, as well as representing, I think, a lot of the material that you have in your book. When you decided to write this book, you, in a way, it's sort of a memoir, but you wanted it more than that. You wanted people to know that sometimes the winds that blow of discord and chaos and disruption, which happens, my goodness, it's happening all over the world right now. Right. You have these situations that come up, but water is very, very fluid. Mm-hmm. And in your cover, water goes wherever it finds a venue, wherever it finds that routing it can take. It bends, it flows, it goes. Yes. And if it doesn't flow, it becomes stagnant. So this is something, the cover of your book has so much to say in its expression. Mm-hmm. But when you decided to write this, was this something that enabled you to get a lot out of yourself?
You know, I didn't intend to get a lot out of myself, but it definitely put me in a moment where I was able to pull things together and make connections. My initial intention was I wanted to provide others with a resource that would walk them through their own journey, their own path, how to find those smooth waters, or know that they can move away from any lands that aren't helpful to them. But I wanted to start with myself. I wanted it to be authentic, and I wanted to connect with my reader and not come off with just, here's information that I want you to get, but to say, I'm sharing with you part of my story in hopes that it will also speak to your story, because we all have one.
You have a doctorate. What is that in?
So my doctorate is in counseling psychology with a focus or concentration in crisis and trauma.
When you're working with people, it isn't really easy sometimes to get to the core issues of what's behind the trauma, because trauma can have so many different layers to it. What drew you into that environment of exploration to work with other people?
You know, I feel like even as a young person, I genuinely was intrigued by the complexity of who people were. And I always feel like my mom even said that I had a way of just kind of seeing through people's layers. And I don't ever accept anything or anyone as face value, as we talked about the cover as people. So I always love helping people see they're more than what's on the surface. And I feel like for many of us, how we operate day to day, unless we've done that exploration and that work to understand ourselves, is only a semblance of who we are because we're responding to all of these different things. So I've always had a heart and a passion for people in helping them feel hopeful, to feel like better is possible, or to let them know that even if you've done things that you wish you hadn't, or you've had experiences that weren't favorable for you, that tomorrow is a new day. And that really just kind of took an organic approach of its own with helping people recognize you're not stuck.
I chuckled when I read the comment that your mother made about you when you were growing up. She said, "I'm praying for your future husband because he'll have his hands full with you." I just love that. I thought that was great.
There's still a lot of truth to that. He would, if he could hear this right now, or when he hears it later, he'll be like, he was absolutely right. And, you know, I met my husband in college. We'll celebrate 25 years of marriage this July. And I remember telling him, so you're about to meet my mom, and if she doesn't like you, it's a wrap because she knows what you're getting into and whether or not you can handle it. And it's hilarious. And he was like, okay, no pressure. But I remember her meeting him, and he is from New York. And she was going, okay, he can take it. He's the one. Like, no return to sender. If you decide to go forward, she's all yours. So, yeah, I can be a handful, but in a good way, I like to say.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so your mom said, I already know the journey and what it's going to be. So, by golly, he's got to pass my test. I thought that was delightful, just absolutely delightful. One of the points that you bring out, one of many that you discuss in this book, is a point that I think is extraordinarily significant, and that is the past only holds the power you have relinquished to it. Now, that is an extremely strong statement, and it is not just an intuitive statement. It is a very practical statement. I've had conversations with people, and it's amazing to me how people, men or women, doesn't make any difference, the gender, how they'll hold on to something in the past that really does not have any relevance to today, the now that they're living in. And it keeps them a prisoner. And they just don't know what to do without it. That is a huge challenge for people. What's been your experience relative to that, both for yourself as well as for others?
Yeah, it is an extremely difficult challenge. And what can be so hard is that we don't always recognize when we're holding on and giving our past power. So, yes, there have definitely been times in my own life where I've watched myself reacting and responding in certain ways that felt very strong and very true. And I had to stop and realize, well, this seems to be repeating itself. I keep responding in this way, even though it doesn't align with how I want to respond. And so when we get to that place, it is our responsibility, or we have an opportunity to look back and go, where am I in the present, but still operating off of some outdated terms, some outdated mindsets and beliefs? And if we stay in that place, we really miss out on viewing life in a very new and different way. And I feel like we also miss out on giving ourselves permission to evolve and to change and to grow.
So often, people will make comments to us, and this is part of life. Nobody's ever going to escape this. And this happened with you when you overheard a teacher saying, please keep an eye on Charryse. Her father left home, and being in a dysfunctional family may begin to show up here at school. We will hear statements like this. And of course, when we're younger, we don't have any life experience to rely upon. We live in our little cocoons because that's the way childhood often is.
Yeah.
It's the rare individual that finds that life has so many different dimensions to it at an early age. That is a very rare occurrence in my observation. Yeah. So until we go through some of our own growing into an understanding about life, its differentials, all of the ups and downs and whatever else we can come up with, and it's pretty tough because you internalize statements like that. Someone making a teacher, your dysfunctional family. Wait a minute. Is it really dysfunctional? What does that mean?
Yeah, you definitely internalize. And it's interesting because, I wrote that line in the book. I chose to share it. I listened to you repeat it. And even today, when I hear it, there is just like a little fire in me that I know how to tend to now that really still sets something off in me. And, I believe now that hearing those words and choosing I'm not going to be bound by those words is part of what I have a desire to give other people and to be able to say I'm not anything special and unique. I just made a choice. And you also can make choices, but it does require some hard work and some determination, but it's definitely worth it on the other side. And I think it's also an important reminder to be really cautious of the words that we speak into the lives of other people and the words that we accept. I work with so many adults that much of what they believe about themselves, even now, is because of things that were said to them when they were younger.
It really is amazing. And to be able, as an adult, I've known people that were close to 90 years of age, that child that had been so deeply wounded within them, that they never ever was healed. They never ever were healed. And they went to their grave not being healed, still crying. And I think of one woman in particular that I knew. The little girl inside of her was always crying in her entire life. Her entire life. And no matter what you said, there was that lockdown in the mind. And there was a conflict between culture that had been in her era and also the dominion and the culture of the family and its internal workings, all of these things. And she became a prisoner. And even though she had had more than one opportunity to set herself free, she did not know how to do that. I've seen this happen with men and women both, and I think you have too, have you not?
I have seen it multiple times, yes, in both men and women. And I think you hit some really great points. Our culture does play a role. How we were raised plays a role. Our spirituality, our belief systems, because there can also be this aspect of us that when we are stuck and we see the door, we can feel fear. I don't know how to operate outside of this. So even though this is uncomfortable, I'm used to the chaos. So I'd rather stay and just manage it than to risk going and opening that door and having to figure things out in a new way. But it can also feel like a betrayal, if our beliefs are connected to what our family values. There are definitely situations in our life that we know we want to change, but if we have a family system, whether it's our immediate or extended family, that is kind of fighting against it, because sometimes our healing and growth might expose other people. So we stay stuck so that everyone else can kind of maintain the way things have always been.
And that doesn't serve them well, but especially it doesn't serve the individual that makes that kind of a choice. You talk about your dad, and I think one of the most difficult cycles that you went through was really coming to terms with who your dad really was. And that's not easy. Because as children, we often want to make the adults in our world our gods. I'll put it that way. And it usually takes a long time to be able to look at them as human beings that are going to make mistakes and make dumb decisions. They're not exempt from that. And until we grow up, we often don't know how to work with that. How did you resolve that situation? Because your dad was involved in drugs and was dealing drugs, wasn't he?
Yeah. You know, if I'm honest, in the beginning, I didn't resolve it. I just knew I needed a boundary. You know, I had that experience that I talk about in the book with my father, and that was a turning point where I knew that this picture that I have in my mind of the father that I wanted to be wasn't reality, and that if I held on to that picture, I was going to be really hurt because that wasn't a mark that he could meet. So I feel like from that point, honestly, until I met my husband in college, I probably put that on hold. I have two older brothers that were a part of my life, and in some ways they're quite a bit older than I am, but they were father figures to me, and that created some different dynamics there. But it was really when I met my husband in college that I came face to face with everything that was unresolved with my father, that I thought, oh, I've grown up and I've been fine without it. But then I'm now in a relationship with a man, and it's bringing these old wounds back up. And that became my time and my season of having to do some really deep work to work through those things.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the reason why you chose the two words expired mindsets.
Yes.
You want to have the expiration date there. That's it. I don't need this belief system anymore. I do not need to have this mindset anymore. I can see things as they need to be looked at, and I don't have to own them. That is huge. Right. That is really, really huge.
Yeah.
But it's liberating.
It is. You know, you think about expired food. If we consume it past its expiration date, it'll make us sick. We won't feel well, right? But there was a time where that food wasn't expired, and it would have been great. You know, you can look at a can of food, and when you first view it on the shelf, it might looks perfectly fine. Everything's all intact, and then you look at the date or open it up and then realize, like, I can't put this in my body. So expired mindsets are the same thing. There's usually a season in our life where that mindset was necessary, it was helpful, it allowed us to manage a situation or a season in our life. But then we have to realize, okay, now I've hit a new season of life, and in order for me to enjoy this the way it's intended, I'm going to have to let go of those same survival mindsets that have gotten me this far. And that can be very hard. You know, it's coming out of my mouth very easily, but it's really difficult to give up things that we felt like, but this has protected me and kept me safe and kept me resilient over a period of time.
Mm-hmm. Your mother left behind a number of journals, and your mother was so significant to you. There was a very, very strong bond. And your mother actually was dying at the time you gave birth to one of your children, and you walked down to her room, and she woke up and actually, after being given so much medication because she was in a lot of pain, she woke up, saw her grandchild, and there was that very special moment. There were people on the hospital staff that said you could not get up, you were not to walk down to the room. But, you know, your mom said that just what we said in the beginning, you've got to know what you got to handle with this one. So, but this is something, the journals that your mother left really made a difference to you. Why?
They were a way of not only staying connected with her, but they are still to this day a way of keeping her memory alive, thinking about what was she experiencing when she was my age. And I've definitely seen that even more now. Her first cancer diagnosis was at 45. And so I am close to that age now. And so many of her journals, especially over the last 10 years, have been really interesting to go back from, but they just remind me of her voice, her words, which is all still very present. But there's something about still being able to see her handwriting and her thoughts. I didn't grow up in the digital generation, so I was outside of the realm of having tons of videos and recordings of my mom, and I don't have things where I can still hear her voice, but I can read her words, and that keeps her voice alive and guides me and keeps me connected, along with lots of other things. And then it's also been a way that I share insights with my children around, I remember when my mom said this, or in one of my mom's journals. So I feel like it's a way that I've shared my mother with my children so that they feel like they know parts of who she is and what she would have been like and what she would have thought.
Mm-hmm. Mindsets. You say they take time and persistence before they're going to be uprooted, which is very true. And you say life often feels like a sitcom. Oh, boy, does it ever. I like to use the term soap opera. Gee whiz. How many people are addicted to the soap operas of life? Not just television, the real life. And you say issues will not be solved in 30 minutes or less. Now, this is really huge with many people today. And having gone through the COVID cycle, which was almost 3 years, that brought so many things to the surface with so many people. And a lot of them just said, I don't know what to do with this. They honest to goodness, did not know what to do with being in, let's face it, a lockdown situation, and you have to live with yourself. You won't have the distractions that you might otherwise have. And that can be extraordinarily challenging. And this is something that you address in your book.
It is. And that was part of why I wrote the book, is because I was sitting with people and talking with friends and colleagues who were flooded when they could no longer outpace their unresolved dynamics and thoughts and behavior patterns. We were in a season that I believe as an entire world where we stayed busy, or we would work on achieving and being productive. We didn't slow down long enough to really acknowledge what we were carrying. And then all of a sudden, literally the world came to a stop. And one of the most striking things in my conversations with people was people weren't just overwhelmed about what was happening in the present. They were all starting to mention, I'm bringing up, or I feel like things are coming to the surface that I haven't thought about in 10 years. Why now? Because they were sitting in silence and they were sitting with themselves. So I wanted Expired Mindsets to be a resource where at their time, regardless of what they had access to in terms of mental health or therapy, because that was challenging and we all had wait lists, that they could walk through this process of how to self-reflect. And we really do have to recognize that what we're carrying didn't come to pass in 30 minutes or less, like a great soap opera or sitcom. So we have to be patient while we peel back those layers and appropriately shed them.
Better is possible, you say in the book, and you have a lovely story about Greg and the gift that his fiancée Jill gave him. Would you share that with my audience?
Yeah, so I really love the whole concept of believing that better is possible. And so I give the example that's loosely around a client who had various experiences where he lost confidence, essentially, to summarize, and he lost trust in himself and didn't believe that he could be loved, and eventually found himself connected to someone that gave him the opportunity to be loved, to feel confident, and to see the world in a completely different perspective. And sometimes when we see things or view things a certain way, we think the way that we see them is the best that it can get without giving away the full story. But there are things that are going to happen and people that are going to come across our lives that are going to give us a new lens and give us a new perspective. if we're willing to kind of put on a new, pair of glasses, so to speak, and really recognize that there's a whole new world out there waiting for us to operate from a higher place of potential.
You have personal algorithm processes that you want people to be aware of, and it's abbreviated to PAP, P-A-P. You say identify the facts, not assumption, but dealing with the facts around the problem, analyze your beliefs towards the situation, and your capability to manage it successfully, determine what skills or support you need to actively work on a solution. Are they available? Examine your response to the situation and what it reveals about how you cope, and last but not least, revise your plan and make any adjustments that improve your ability to function. Now, this is, in my mind's view, very common sense, but often we need to be able to have something like, well, ask this of yourself, ask this of yourself, ask that of yourself, and enable us, and that's what you're trying to do in the book, to help people understand that a mindset, and sometimes it's very difficult, very, very difficult to even recognize your mindset.
It is. And that's why I wanted to give people the PAP 5 process, where it's something that is tangible. When we are overwhelmed or we're trying to work through a mindset, the challenge is, as long as it stays in our mind, it can feel like a game of ping pong. Like we're going back and forth, and there is this blurred line between reality and fantasy, or what we've always believed and what we're trying to believe. So it's important for us to also have some tangible principles like this PAP algorithm, where we can sit back. And part of why step 1 is identify the facts, not assumptions, is because a lot of our mindset and beliefs are based on what we assume will happen because of what's happened in the past. So if we can walk through that process of identifying those facts and determining, well, what do I need to work on a solution, then that keeps us from also just keeping it in our mind and spinning our wheels and going, what other resources do I need? It's okay for us to ask for help. And it's meant to feel like a cycle, because we have to constantly be able to revise and make adjustments. Part of what makes, extending or really creating a new mindset sometimes difficult is that we think it's linear, that there needs to be this 3-step process, and this is what you do every time. And then when it doesn't work, we panic. So that last step of really revising your plan and making adjustments allows us to go, it's not about failure. It's about learning from the process and going, that worked, but here's where I need to adapt it so that I'm really able to succeed in this situation. And that's what better means, is giving ourselves room to grow and create a different kind of inner harmony with ourselves.
Your daughter had been in college. She's over 21, and yet there was this conversation you had with her, which I think is a very normal conversation, believe it or not. She said to you that she worked so hard to do what's uncomfortable and pushed herself to be what everybody expected her to be. And she was fighting anxiety, and yet she was always smiling. Oh, everything's okay. Her question to you was, will it ever stop being so painful?
Oh, I'm laughing because we literally had that conversation yesterday. She is now 23 and living out in California, in LA. And we were having this conversation, and we were still talking about certain aspects of change and growth that are uncomfortable. So I feel like, we've moved a little bit away from it being painful, but discomfort is a part of change. If we think about a wound and when it needs to heal, it throbs for a moment before it regenerates. When we have a part of our body that is in need of repair, there's some physical therapy, and that's a process of stretching it and growing it, and it's uncomfortable before those muscles rebuild. So I want everyone to know that growth is uncomfortable, but the intensity of the pain isn't always going to be the same. And the goal is that eventually you build up your endurance, you learn how to move through things in a way that you may not enjoy it, but it's not as uncomfortable as it used to be because now you have practice and you know how to move through life in a way and explore your mindset in a way that you also don't end up in the same situation. So you're more informed now.
Mm-hmm. You bring out a point of information relative to mental illness, and this can happen to anyone. I mean, there can be a breakdown of there's different types of breakdowns, emotional, mental, spiritual, and even physical breakdowns of different types. So you have this, and you say half of all lifetime mental health conditions begin by the age of 14 and 75% by the age of 24. Now, that's quite a percentage. Where did that information come from?
Yeah, so that information comes from longitudinal, which means long-term research that has been taken around when individuals are diagnosed with mental illnesses or mental challenges that comes from a combination of the CDC or NAMI, which is the National Alliance of Mental Health Institute, both which do studies every year, and then we put all of that information together. We are seeing those numbers continue to hold and remain to be true. Our 18 to 25-year-olds are one of the most heightened times of life. That's when we are crystallizing our emotional intelligence. And then we think about this recent group of young people and young adults who've missed some years of growth because of COVID and those different dynamics. And then also just think about the impulsivity and the inconsistency and the constant change that many of us have during that time and season. It creates a lot of fear and confusion, and that's typically the time that we're trying to figure out, who am I? What do I need? What do I believe about myself? And part of how we also know that that is still remaining to be true is when we don't go through those years and have adequate support and health and resources, we make some big life decisions. And then we hit middle age, late 40s, early 50s, and we hit crisis, where we feel like I'm living a life that isn't the one that I've chosen, or the mental challenges or overwhelm that I've experienced has gotten to a point that I can no longer hide from it, and I'm going to have to deal with it. And it's even more overwhelming because we have all these ways that we've compensated over time. So those statistics are very real and very accurate. And the hope for sharing that is not only for us to give ourselves the space to go back to that time and look at what needs to be healed, but if we have children or grandchildren, to really prioritize giving them different opportunities to explore and address their harmful or negative mindset than maybe we were given if we grew up in a generation that didn't really encourage us to be honest about what we were feeling.
Releasing patterns that no longer serve you well. That's the subtitle to Expired Mindsets. Dr. Charryse Johnson is my guest, and she has a website. You can go to her website, check out her information, and it's Dr. Charryse, and it's Charryse Johnson, Johnson, and you'll find all kinds of information about her, her work, and also this publication. Of course, it's also available on Amazon. And Charryse, I want to thank you, Dr. Charryse Johnson. I want to thank you very much for being my guest. I think you have put together some wonderful tools in the book, as well as sharing stories of people that you know and also your own personal life experiences. And it's well done. Thank you for being my guest.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for the time that you've taken to read the book and to share it with all of your listeners. I have enjoyed this conversation, and I'm so glad this resource is out there for all those who need it.
I wish you nothing but the best of success. Thank you again. This is Donna Seebo. We're saying goodbye to Dr. Charryse Johnson. Remember, just go to her website, Dr. Charryse, and Charryse is spelled Charryse, johnson.com. We are taking a break. We're going to be back in just a little bit. And the phone number, if you wanted to call in and chat with me, is 253-582-5597. The Donna Seebo Show is heard weekdays, Monday through Friday, 8 to 9 p.m. Pacific Time. Callers are welcome to call in during the second half of the program at 253-582-5597. Please note that the announcement is made at the bottom of the hour if I'm not in studio able to take phone calls. Warriors for Peace is heard every Wednesday from 7 to 8 p.m. For current information regarding my email newsletter, programming, and appearances, go to DelphiInternational.com. For information on publications, including my award-winning children's books, audiobooks, and more, go to MrsSeebo'sClassics.com. This is Donna Seebo. If you or someone you know is an author and would like to be interviewed on the Donna Seebo Show or Warriors for Peace, please send a copy of the publication along with contact information, phone number, email, and website to the Donna Seebo Show, P.O. Box 99015, Lakewood, Washington 98496. That's the Donna Seebo Show, P.O. Box 99015, Lakewood, Washington 98496. Please allow 6 to 8 weeks for review. Thank you. Who's coming up on the Donna Seebo Show and Warriors for Peace? Well, we're going to be coming to June 1 before we know it. We've got 3 shows coming up, the last 3 shows for the month of May. We're going to be talking with a woman, Meredith Ethington, and it's about the mother lode, and I think you'll enjoy her quite a bit. Shamanic Dreaming. We'll be traveling to Scotland for that conversation with Carol Day, and then the last show of the month of May is The Art of Mastery with Peter Ralston. Then we're going to be talking about the coronavirus and healing therapies with Vera McCoy. This is something where a lot of people are having after effects, even if they have had a vaccination. So these are suggestions that can really serve well. And then the game, Merrily Sweeney. What is that game? We'll find out. Mind Golf with Bob Young and so much more. Now, on June 1, we will be putting out the newsletter. And, of course, all of the guests that are going to be coming up on the show, along with the titles of their books, will be included in that newsletter, as well as my speaking schedule. And I want you to know that if you've missed a show, and you say, oh, I just wanted to listen to this interview, Donna, go into the archives. I had a request today about a show that was done 2 years ago, and it's not in the archives currently. And I was able to pull it out and put it up so someone's going to be able to listen to it. The archives never go away, but we have a limited amount of space. There's hundreds of shows in the archives. So if there was a show that you missed and you want to find out how you can find it, all you have to do is let me know, and I will tell you where you can find it, what the show number is, etc. Also, you need to be aware that on the player, the latest 13 to 15 hours of programming, and that includes Warriors for Peace, is made available for you 24/7. And this is something that I think is significant because you can turn on the computer if you're busy with work, then you're going to be able to deal with that. And then V is for Victory. Craig Nelson is going to be my guest on Warriors for Peace, and that is something I'm looking forward to. Monday is Memorial Day, and it is going to be celebrated by so many different people, and we'll be having different stories to share with you, honoring those that have served. It is so very, very significant when we think about what goes on in our nation's history, the various wars that have been engaged in by our nation. My goodness, ever since its beginning in the 1700s, when we took the positioning of being our own nation, no longer underneath the thumb of the government of England. So you have these points in history, and it's good to go back and to really look at history, the good, the bad, the ugly and anything and everything else that might come up. Sometimes people want to be locked down about the realities of what have gone on in life, and that's a mistake. Because when we do not take care of really looking at the past in its forms, and I say forms for a reason, because there's many, many different levels. What might be very dark and ugly for someone else might be a tremendously positive aspect of growth and development in so many different arenas of life, and you don't know that. If you're not open, if your mind is closed, and you say, I don't want to see any and all of this, that, or the other, that's a mistake. And I say it's a mistake because we learn from interaction with others. We human beings create a lot of our own messes. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It is a true statement. But we can also clean up those messes. We just finished talking with a woman that was talking about expired mindsets. We have to change our minds to improve our world. We have to change our mind, and this is our personal world, as well as many global aspects. So it's something you have to start with you first. You clean up your own act, and then you're going to be able to be a light for other people. And that can be done in so many different ways. Many years ago, I interviewed a wonderful person, a gentleman by the name of Denny Stockdale. Denny, when he wrote his book, it was called The Neighborhood Ice Cream Shop. And he put everything into an environment, a description of environment that would take you back. You could think of maybe the late 1800s, the early 1900s, the ice cream shops. And if you watched the old movies from the 30s and the 40s, it was a big thing. You'd go to the ice cream shop. Everybody in the town would go to the ice cream shop. Everybody knew everybody. And that's where so many conversations occurred. And he wrote about something that I thought I would share with you this evening. And by the way, if you want to give me a call, it's 253-582-5597. Oh, and don't forget there's the Authors Showcase. We're going to be adding additional authors. And those authors that have been on the show with me, because of their support, we're able to do the programming. But also what we have are their interviews. And you can go in and just go into the Authors Showcase, and all of the links to their interviews are right there. All you have to do is tap on them, and you can hear the conversations we've had. But anyway, getting back to Denny's stories, he said dreams, and he has acronyms for everything. And the acronym for dreams is Defining Reality Eventually Achieves My Success. DREAMS. And he gave a story that I thought was really good. He said there was a real need for us to dare to dream and to make it okay that it is bigger than it seems. There was a fisherman who was struggling for almost a week without, he couldn't catch anything. There was nothing happening. He was just about to give up and become a farmer when his fishing rod nearly jumped out of his hands. There definitely had to be something worth reeling in on the other end of the line. After almost an hour, he hauled the strangest-looking fish into his boat. It was unlike any other fish he had ever caught. Right away, the fish started talking. I'm a magic fish. I make dreams come true. All you have to do is turn me loose and tell me what your dreams are. Well, the fisherman didn't believe the fish, so he cooked it, and he ate it. Then he realized that he had just killed to have the chance to achieve his long-time dream that he had had, to enable it to become true. And that's a very simple story, but it has a lot of wisdom in it. Sometimes when we have a dream, opportunity knocks on our door. We open the door, And maybe it's just a little tiny opportunity. We say, well, it's not big enough. We slam the door on it. Well, that little opportunity may not wait around to see when if you're going to open the door again. Sometimes opportunity comes once. And his story reminded me of one that I heard. This was many years ago, and it was a true story. It was about a man that had gone in to see a particular counselor. And he was very, very frustrated because he was an actor and he really wanted to be big in show business. And he had waited and waited and waited to be called in, and there was an agent he worked with, and he had been going after certain parts for so long. One day a call comes in. As it turned out, it was before a planned weekend. And his agent called him and said, it's happening. You have an opportunity here. You are wanted for a particular role, a particular part. Well, the plan for the weekend was to go out sailing. He didn't respond to his agent. He knew what the message was, and he knew what the opportunity was, and he decided to go sailing. He went sailing. That opportunity didn't come by again. We all have the opportunity to make choices, and he had the right to make the choice that he did. But how important was it to him to really go after that opportunity that was knocking on his door? But he slammed the door shut. So we need to accept our own personal responsibility. I've known individuals that aspired to do something and they would talk about it and they romanticized about it in their mind. But when it came down to the discipline of showing up to do whatever was necessary, they didn't want to be bothered. Well, then that means they really did not want to achieve what they said they wanted to achieve. But it was nice in conversation how they would say, oh, I'm just not lucky, when that wasn't the case really at all. They weren't willing to make the commitment. And that's the key. Showing up for the commitment that you say that you want makes a difference. Starting out small makes a difference. I've known so many people that have worked their way up. I worked for a boss whose father had started a company, which was quite a successful company. And I will never forget that one of the things that he did is that when he was a kid, he was working in the mail room of the company. His dad said, if you want to be a part of this, if you want to learn about business, then you're going to have to understand what goes on. And little by little, as he got older, because his dad said, this is what you're going to do. If you don't want to do it, fine, you step away from it. But you don't have a silver spoon that's going to be put in your mouth. You're going to have to earn the knowledge and the understanding of what it takes to run a business. And this is often something that we don't want. We have people that once they get a certain level of education, they think, well, that's it. I go out, I'm going to be paid $250,000 a year. It doesn't happen that way. Sometimes it does, but usually it doesn't. And you get upset because you're put in a job with a company or in an environment, you go, so this is terrible. Maybe you're told to sweep the floors or to wash windows. But if you do that, if you find out what it takes and you show an interest and you communicate with the people that are around you, you're going to be able to grow up into what is really most suitable for you. And that happened with me. I found that there were many different environments. When I stopped to reflect on it, when you're younger, you don't, but as I got older, I would reflect on it and say, my goodness, how is it that I evolved into a media positioning when that wasn't even on my radar? It came about because there were people that said, this is something that you can do and you can do well. It took years. It wasn't something that happened overnight. And my expansion into television programming is something else. It is entirely different. It was something that, yes, I had done in the 1990s, but look at the changes in technology. My goodness, a whole different world and environment. But still, it's all about communication, isn't it? And that's where I found, no matter what job I had, there was always that aspect. But I learned about many other things as well. I learned about people. I learned about adaptation. I learned about showing up, even when I didn't want to. But you show up. And one of the comments that I hear from people that are in business is that so many people, young people especially, say, well, I don't feel like I should have to show up. If I don't feel like I want to do it, I shouldn't have to do it. Well, one way or the other, you're going to find that there's going to be something that you really want to achieve, and you're going to have to do the work to achieve what it is you want. I don't care if it's bodybuilding or building the finest technology for the next spaceship that goes to the moon. It doesn't make any difference. Where are you going to have that commitment and have that level of excellence that is going to make someone say, I want you as part of my team? Because you never achieve success all by yourself, ever. Doesn't happen with anybody. We like to say people are self-made. Well, that's nice. They've made that commitment. But it took a lot of people supporting them, seen and unseen, that make it possible for achievement of success to happen. It's all about people. People interacting with people. Really significant. So, as I looked at that acronym for dreams, defining reality eventually achieves my success. I thought that Denny Stockdale did a nice job with that. Just wanted to share that with you for today. And 253-582-5597. And yes, as soon as the television has a date, the television programming that I have done, as soon as that date is set up and available, I will be letting you know about that. In the world of plants, and we've got an interview that's going to be coming up on plants, there are so many that we are discovering that we didn't even know existed. You wouldn't think that would be the case in our world today, but there is so much that we don't know, whether it's plants or dealing with aspects of sea life. One of the things that I have observed is that there are many of the deep sea creatures that have been coming to the surface. And of course, that has to do with the earthquakes that are going on, the water that has become warmer. They are shifting into whatever environments are most suitable for them. And also the volcanoes. We have volcanoes, just doing their thing in Mexico City, in Italy, in the many of the islands in different parts of the world. Mother Earth is anything but quiet. And there is a lot of shaking going on and a lot of disruption going on. And this is something that is not new to our environment that we're living in. It actually is something that's been going on for millions and actually billions of years. Our planet is quite old. I wanted to share something with you about Chinese woodblock printing. There is such a history in China. They had paper long before a lot of other cultures and civilizations in the world had it. And when they find old records, it's really quite exciting because in the modern world of China, they have lost a great deal of history unless, depending on what era somebody came in from or through, then they were hiding things so that they wouldn't be destroyed. And this is something that has gone on with humanity forever. because emperors in China would often want everything erased, just like Egypt. The same thing occurred in Egypt. They had statues destroyed. They had all kinds of things destroyed. When the new pharaoh or queen of Egypt, whichever title they ended up with, when they came into power, then we don't want to remember these other people. I'm the one that's the kingpin or queenpin at this time. And so consequently, this is done throughout history. It is done throughout history. And in archaeological digs, they're discovering a lot that seemingly was destroyed, but they're finding so much. Now, it was 400 years before Gutenberg produced the very first Bible on a printing press. And before that, for over 400 years, there were monks and there were artisans in China that were doing their own printing. They had their own language, and they actually created 165,000 wood blocks to put together a religious canon that was a lot longer than the Bible as we know it today. And this particular text, it's on display at a new exhibition at the Huntington Library in California. And if ever you have a chance to go to that library, whenever I'm in California, if I have the time, I always love to see the Huntington Library because it's not just a library. This was a family built a mansion there, and all of the acreage that they had was converted into gardens, and it is spectacularly beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. But what they were also able to acquire was amazing. Absolutely amazing. But they had the money, they had the means, and it was done. So here is this exhibition at the Huntington Library in California. And you can see the scripture of the great flower ornament of the Buddha. Now, it was created in 1085, and it is part of a larger compendium of Buddhist law and aphorisms. That was apparently the very third time in Chinese history to try to centralize, translate, and print Buddhist scripture. Do you know it stretches out? It's like an accordion. It's folded very carefully. It stretches out to 31 feet. Amazing. Now, there was a temple in the province of Fujian that commissioned thousands of monks and artisans. And once they had gathered the wood that they wanted to use, they wrote the characters of each page on a piece of paper, then transferred the page to a wood block while the ink was still wet. This is so laborious. And then, only then, would a carver be able to engrave those wooden blocks. It took them 32 years. It's a 5,850 volume work. It contains sutras, legal philosophy, just all kinds of information. Now, they think there was more than one edition that was produced, but they have no idea. Absolutely no. And it just is amazing what transpired so many centuries ago. Isn't it wonderful to know that people, even back then, wanted to keep a record of something so that it could be passed to future generations? There was a tremendous tradition for reading, for writing, for being knowledgeable, and the training was given not just to the elite, but also to those in the average environment, if they so choose or would choose to accept that opportunity. Donna Seebo here, delighted that you were able to join me. Have a magnificent holiday weekend, and we'll be here again on Monday evening. Bye for now.
been listening to The Donna Seebo Show. We're delighted that you were able to join us and invite you to tell your friends and family about the program. Have a wonderful day.